Horror!
In the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, among rows of neat single-story houses with green lawns and cacti in the yards, lived George Miller, an elderly American who had long since retired. His neighbors respected him for his calm nature and good nature. George was always ready to help with small tasks or just keep them company in conversation. His life flowed steadily, and his days passed in a familiar routine. In the mornings, George liked to sit on the porch of his house with a cup of coffee, watching passers-by and the birds that flocked to the feeder by the fence. Sometimes he spent a long time gardening or watering the bushes near the yard. All this created a feeling of comfort and tranquility. A quiet life in the suburbs of a large American city. But one day, this tranquility was disrupted. One afternoon, while at home, George heard strange rustling and muffled sounds at the front door that he had never heard before. He became alert, opened the door, and froze in complete shock. Standing right on his doorstep was a thin lion, and next to him was a small lion cub. Their fur was dusty, and their eyes showed signs of fatigue and hunger. For the quiet suburbs of Phoenix, it was such an incredible sight that George couldn't believe his eyes at first. George, still stunned by what he had seen, quickly went inside to get something to eat. He took out some meat and fruit, carefully carried them to the door, and placed them on the porch. The lion and lion cub approached cautiously, sniffing the food and checking that the situation was safe. George's heart was pounding. He knew these were unusual guests, and any sudden movement could scare them away. When the lion began to eat, George watched him, trying not to invade his space. The little lion cub cautiously reached for the meat, learning from its mother, while George spoke quietly to them, trying to create a trusting atmosphere. He understood that these animals were hungry and frightened, and his main task was to calm them down and show them that he was a friend. After the food was eaten, George picked up the phone and called wildlife rescue specialists. He explained in detail that a lion and a lion cub had come to his house, hungry and frightened, and asked for rescuers to arrive as soon as possible. He stood at the door, watching as the animals cautiously rested nearby, preparing for the help that was on its way. A few minutes later, a large white van with the emblem of the Wildlife Rescue Service pulled up in a quiet suburb of Phoenix. 3 experienced rescuers in bright orange vests and beige shirts got out of the vehicle, carefully assessed the situation, and discussed a plan of action. George, an elderly man with gray hair, stood at his front door watching as the professionals cautiously approached the lion and her cub, trying not to stress the animals. The lion growled quietly, and the cub hid anxiously behind its mother, and every step the rescuers took was calculated to keep the wild pair calm. The rescuers carefully prepared special soft stretchers and straps to secure the lion, and began to slowly and carefully move it onto the stretcher. The rescuers used soft and confident touches to calm the lion and avoid causing panic. Every gesture and every command was precise and coordinated, demonstrating professionalism and care for the animals. Once both lions were securely fastened and safely lifted onto the stretcher, the team carefully carried them to the van. George watched with bated breath as the van pulled away smoothly, slowly driving through the quiet streets of the neighborhood, taking the lion and lion cub to the zoo, where they would be lovingly cared for by specialists. The elderly man felt relieved to see that the animals were now in safe hands, knowing that this unexpected encounter had ended safely and happily for the Wild family. The van stopped at a spacious zoo on the outskirts of the city. Employees and rescuers quickly but carefully unloaded the stretcher with the lion and her cub. They were transferred to a specially prepared open enclosure with enough space for rest and movement. Here, the animals felt much freer and safer than in the city yard. Rescuers and zoo staff carefully examined the lion, checking his general condition after the journey. One of them brought a bowl of water. Another prepared meat to feed the weakened animal. The cub cautiously approached first and began to eat, and the adult lion, satisfied that it was safe, joined him. The atmosphere gradually became calm and trusting. The team remained nearby, watching the lion's every move. They noted how the animals began to relax and recorded all changes in their behavior. For the rescuers, this was another step towards success, giving wild animals a chance at a normal life in safety. And for George, who had first encountered these predators on his doorstep a few days earlier, it was a story he would never forget. When George arrived at the zoo, he noticed a familiar lion in the enclosure. She raised her head as if sensing his presence and slowly approached the fence. His cub, now grown but still childishly curious, clumsily hurried after her. Their eyes met, and at that moment, all the noise of the zoo seemed to disappear. The lion held George's gaze, waved its tail slightly, and the cub jumped happily near her, as if recognizing an old friend. People around them watched this unusual scene in surprise, and George himself felt a warmth spreading through his chest, as if his kindness had truly been understood and accepted. George stayed near the enclosure, watching the lion and his cub. He took out the small pieces of meat he had brought with him and carefully offered them to the lion. The lion cautiously took the food from his hands, while the cub jumped up and down happily, making clumsy attempts to grab the treat. George laughed, feeling the trust between humans and animals gradually strengthen. They spent several hours together. He petted the lion, played with the little cub, and watched their behavior, learning to understand the language of movements and sounds. George stood by the enclosure longer than usual, watching the lion and lion cub settle into their new home. The adult predator looked much calmer than he had on the day he first appeared on George's doorstep. His powerful body now radiated confidence and tranquility, while the cub ran excitedly across the grass, playing with his father's tail and a stick he had found in the corner of the enclosure. George understood that now they were safe from hunger, loneliness, or danger, because caring specialists would always be nearby. He was happy to know that he had become part of this rescue story. When it was time to leave, George took a step closer to the fence and waved quietly. The lion slowly got up and approached him, and the lion cub, jumping happily, pressed its nose against his palm. This gesture of trust touched George deeply. It was as if the animals were thanking him for the chance at a new life. He lingered for a moment, savoring this touching moment, and then left the zoo with a light heart, determined to visit them again and again. For him, it became not just a memory, but a symbol of the power of kindness and care for wildlife. Every rescue is a chance to give animals a new lease on life and remind us how important it is to care for wildlife. Thanks to the efforts of rescuers, even the most desperate situations turn into stories of hope. May these moments inspire us to cherish and protect animals around the world. Subscribe and help us give more animals a second chance. See you next time.